The Sith draw their power from cruelty and their strength from suffering. Whether the pain they endure themselves or they inflicted on others, it does not matter. They are creatures of the night, content with either choking another being out with their bare hands, or annihilating an entire world should it serve their purpose. There is a reason the Jedi continue to rise up against them and to go to war anytime the Sith reveal themselves. In a religion that worships death and thrives off oppressing the weak, it's difficult to imagine any follower of the Sith way could be redeemed, and yet, a precious few of them have. Theoretically speaking, almost all Sith have the capacity to turn their lives around given the right circumstance. Almost all of them. But in today's holocron, we wanted to ask a bit of a complex question. What is the point of no return in the life of a Sith? When does a Sith Lord truly become irredeemable? And in the holocron, we will reveal that we believe that there were only ever two Sith that were impossible to redeem. Before we open the holocron though, the galaxy has never been closer nor cheaper. For a limited time only, grab some of your favorite Star Wars merchandise at a stellar 50% off for a limited time. This is your chance to build your own rebel base, or to rule like a Sith Lord without breaking the bank. But hurry, the deal will disappear faster than the Millennium Falcon does in hyperspace. Link in the description down below and use code WAVE for another 15% off. Now my friends, the holocron awaits. Our quest for answers begins with establishing common knowledge. Most Sith throughout history are not going to be redeemed at all. Many would claim that there was a point of no return, and that moment is when they embraced the dark side. If you ask Yoda, he claims that the point of no return is when you give in to the emotions like fear and anger. Yoda says that once you start down this dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. This was a tightly held belief by the Jedi Order for a very long period of time. The Jedi had seen many of their own fall to the dark side countless times throughout history. Strong, wise, compassionate Jedi completely twisted into black-hearted evil beings. Dooku, one of the finest Jedi in the Order's history. Yet, when he embraced the dark, regardless of the noble reasons that he had for doing so, he became a tyrannical murderer. His name was literally Darth Tyrannus. Very few Jedi ever attempted to talk sense back into those that fell to the dark side, though Yoda did try once with Dooku in the novel Dark Rendezvous, and came within a hair's width of success of turning Dooku back to the light. But even then he failed. Negotiating with a freshly turned Sith Lord is one thing, but redeeming a seasoned Darksider is different. Turning a Sith back to the light is nearly impossible. The Sith are literally taught that things such as compassion and love are weakness to be removed like tumors. How a gardener prunes a tree of unwanted branches, so do the Sith spend actual years pruning themselves of all human qualities. It's extremely difficult to bring someone back to the light who has intentionally plunged themselves into the darkness. This is why most believe that the Sith are irredeemable once they make that pledge to the Order. From that point on, they become obsessed with power as an infinite drug. But despite its endlessness, they can never get enough of it. Every new hit of the dark side makes them want more, leading them to spill more blood, drinking in the sufferings of victims. But the Sith are not just mindless killers. They specifically devise plans of galactic domination. They want to make life miserable for everyone, to see themselves at the top of a hierarchy, placing themselves atop an imaginary pyramid. The thing that separates the Sith though, is that they don't just use the dark side like a dark Jedi does, or as a cultist would. The Sith seek to own the dark side, to become so totally immersed in it that they become unrecognizable as a mortal. To that end, the dark side demands total devotion from the Sith. The very first murder of a Sith is when they take upon themselves the Darth moniker. This is because they kill their old self. They become a completely new identity with a new name. They are reborn through the dark side. The dark side gives them their new name. The point is, redeeming a Sith is nearly impossible. And yet, a handful of Sith have been redeemed. Those fully entrenched in the dark side, in fact. Sith like Darth Vader, Ulic Qel-Droma, Darth Sion, even Ajunta Pal, Revan, Bastila Shan, who may have not been technically a Sith, or Kelith just to name a few just off the top of our head. There are Sith who reside in a bit of a gray area, as there is some debate whether or not they were ever evil to begin with, or if their redemption actually led to them embracing the light. The most prime example of this is the Sith Darth Vectivus, who fans of the channel will know well. Vectivus was known as the Sith that did no evil, but it was never stated that he went to the light side. Quite the opposite. Vectivus studied the dark side and discovered powerful new abilities, but he would ultimately die in peace. But we digress. We won't go into strenuous detail about each and every instance of redemptions that we listed, but all of them except for 3 have one thing in common. Someone redeemed them out of love. Luke Skywalker is the greatest example of redeeming a Sith Lord through love. The emotion was the one pure power of the light side that could trump the dark. The only way that the dark side fights love is when they can twist it into possession and jealousy. But true, selfless love casts such a blinding light that it leaves no shadow. Love weakens the Sith. It leaves them vulnerable to be talked down when the veil of their mind is torn. The difference with the 3 remaining Sith Lord being Revan, who had his memory forcefully wiped, Kelith who found that the Sith way of passion and pain only led to temporary power and eventually discovered the ways of peace through his own study, and Ajunta Pal, who was redeemed post-mortem when his spirit wandered for thousands of years, full of regret over his past life and sin. But now things are going to get complicated. Because we now have established that it is possible for a Sith to be redeemed, we want to locate at what point is there no return for one. And the bar is surprisingly very high. Darth Sion of all people is the most surprising example. His name was the Lord of Pain. This was because he discovered a disgusting form of immortality. Using the dark side to draw from an agonizing physical pain, he was able to hold his body together despite being mortally wounded. His flesh and bones were literally held together by his own sheer force of will. He lived in constant agony, but the agony fueled his power, allowing him to keep on living as a basic zombie, an undead creature that could not be struck down. It's hard to say he was even alive anymore, as he's more of a spirit and a consciousness holding together a bag of cracking apart flesh and crumbling bones. Every waking moment of Sion's life was torture, and yet he could not let go of it. But he found himself falling in love with Mitra Surik, the Jedi outcast, and in his final confrontation with her, Mitra convinced him to let go of his pain, to pass on through the Force. And at that moment, after being stricken down repeatedly by her blade, Sion heeded her advice and did pass on. He even let her know what Darth Trey's sinister plan was and warned her of the dangers ahead. And finally, he let go of his torn body, joining with the Force. If a literal monster like Sion can manage to be redeemed, then the standard has a seriously high bar. But we don't believe it goes much higher than this in all truth. In fact, we think it only goes to about this level. His partner is one of the Sith that we do not think would be redeemed after all. His partner, Darth Nihilus. Nihilus was dealt probably one of the worst hands in all of Star Wars history. He was a nameless face in a galaxy like any other being, until the devastation of Malachor V. This caused a wound in the Force to form inside of this man. The wound created a hunger within the man that threatened to consume him if he did not feed on life force of other beings. Nihilus became the Lord of Hunger. He drained the life out of all of the people and planets that he could find. And soon, after populations of entire worlds were on the menu, along with even the planets themselves, a being that literally consumes and absorbs that much life is an abominable creation. He was no longer a man or even a consciousness inside of armor. He was a wound, a creature of pure will, of intent whose mere voice caused suffering to all who heard it. He wasn't redeemable because there was no longer a man underneath to be redeemed. Nihilus was something more, something worse. When the dark side consumes one in this way, this is the point of no return. So long as there is a man there to be spoken to, there is still a chance, however small that could be. The only instance that we believe a mortal was not redeemable would be the Sith Lord Darth Vitiate. In all recordings of his birth, it is insinuated that Vitiate was born evil. He caused death and pain by the time that he was barely a toddler. Vitiate's eyes were as black and as bottomless as the pit of hell, and animals avoided him. After consuming the life force of his homeworld and leaving it a drained gray husk, Vitiate began to believe that it was his destiny to become a Force god. He desired to drain all life from every planet in existence, to possess the Force as his very own, as the Force's owner. He was able to split his soul into several different vessels, becoming more of an entity than a man. The only part of Vitiate that ever caused him trouble was the small piece of his soul that still belonged to Valkorion, as he had possessed the body of Valkorion long ago. The last vestiges of who Valkorion was caused Vitiate to actually care for the family that he had created, even if he was cruel to them. The other parts of Vitiate, though, hated Valkorion and the small parts of Valkorion's spirit, even though that part of him was his strongest iteration. The other versions of Vitiate believed that this was the weakest iteration because of his love for his family. It was revealed in the final battle when all three versions of Vitiate were being berated and destroyed that this is how the rest of them felt about Valkorion. Valkorion only used his family to gain more power and control. The words of his wife Senya cut him deeply to his black heart and caused him to become distracted during their final battle. This is extremely complicated because it wasn't necessarily Vitiate that cared for his family, but Valkorion. He had taken the body of a noble and a good warrior. He had hollowed out the body as a shell, removing Valkorion's spirit and replacing it with his own. But it was those last little bits of the original Valkorion that caused Vitiate to feel something about his family, however small those feelings may have actually been. But according to Senya, he had once been a happy and a loving father. But one day that changed dramatically. The day the spirit of Vitiate rejoined with Valkorion's body. Valkorion had been on autopilot until then. So to put it simply, it wasn't possible for Vitiate to be redeemed, but the fading lights of love within the body of Valkorion did cause him to become weaker, and we thought it was very important to mention that here. And so, this is why I believe that these were the only two cases where it was literally impossible for a Sith Lord to be brought back to the light. Once again, we want to restate that broadly speaking, there is little to no chance of any Sith Lord finding their way back to the light. But we thought the question, is it technically possible, was an interesting one to explore, and we hope you enjoyed. The dark side is a powerful and a seductive force, one that draws in many victims and intends to keep them. The Sith perform heinous acts against life and civility, and to almost all of them, the light side is nothing but weakness. But even if it's a fraction of a percent, all Sith have the capability to be redeemed, except for, in our opinion, these two. Thank you for delving into the depths of the Sith archives today. Your journey to the dark side has only now begun. Before you go though, a quick secret from the Empire to you. The merch page is 50% off for a limited time. Don't let these galactic treasures slip away. Seize them now and rule your collection with the power of the dark side. Unlimited savings await, and may the Force be with you.